Welcome to Right Talk with Mike Lee. Once again, I have a couple of guests this evening, and I am really looking forward to this show. I have two gentlemen with me this evening with whom I'm pretty well acquainted with. On my left is Kenneth Thompson, who's a radio show host on KAZI Radio. He hosts, what's the name of your show, Kenneth?
The Voice, the Wake Up Call, The Voice of Austin, Wednesday mornings from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.
On my right is the Honorable Robert Muhammad from the Nation of Islam. And what I want to chat with my buddies about today is about this recent election and what it kind of means and what should the black community do in response to it. What do you think about this election, KT?
I'll tell you what. I think it taught a lot of us a lot of things. That is, a lot of folks don't know the mainstream. Don't really understand what the mainstream is, or they have miscalculated what the mainstream is. I think the mainstream media. That's what I'm talking about. Projected a narrative. And that narrative just was not true. That narrative just was not true. And I think that, and that's because I think they only pay attention to who they want to pay attention to. And I think this time it became one of those things that there was another voice out there that was being spoken, that was connecting to folks that the mainstream, I think, just overlooked completely.
Did the outcome surprise you?
I think in some ways it did, in some ways it didn't. I mean, I think in some ways it did, in some ways it didn't. I mean, if you pay attention to the mainstream, based on this thing that we call these polls and the polling analysis, whether they are local polls, national polls, all the polls said that Clinton would probably be the winner. And however, I think what they did not take into account of is that those folks who perhaps when they answer the question, they answer the question the way they thought people want to hear, but had a different intent. Okay. And so yeah.
Well, Robert, did the outcome surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me because during the campaign, because the president-elect was drawing such large crowds, and because of some of the things that were being said, people were getting excited over some of the things that were being said, but there was no backlash. And so there's an underbelly of what, Brother KT was talking about, the mainstream. It's not the mainstream. But there's a page was taken from the 2008 election of Barack Obama, tapped into a portion of the society or the citizenship that, really had been abandoned, actually. And so because that was tapped into with this message of making America great again, which may have meant one thing on the surface level, but to some it meant something else. So it didn't surprise me at all. I think that many people, both black, white, brown, poor, rich, I think they are, we have grown tired of the status quo. We're tired of hearing these magnificent and beautiful painted up words and speeches and whatnot, and we actually want to see some change. And so people want to see change on every side, in every aspect of human endeavor. And so there was a group of people that were neglected, I think, in past elections, and the president-elect Donald Trump was able to cash in on that with his message on that neglected population.
Now, one of the things I believe is that what I say, what you say, Robert, or what you say, Kenneth, may or may not be true. But what happens is the truth. And I want to refer back to an event that happened in connection with the Trump rally here. We had a gathering of, you were there, Robert. You weren't there. Richard Franklin was there. It was a bunch of people from the black community who were members of organizations, leaders, so to speak, I guess. And when Trump came to town, we all ended up in the room talking about the speech.
Yes.
And to me, it was like kind of symbolic. Trump comes to town, black folks come together and talk about some things they need to talk about. And what I'm hoping is that will happen on a larger scale. On a larger scale, in the sense of maybe there are things you and I could work on. There are things you and I could work on. There are things all three of us can work together on.
I think
That's what I'm. That's what
yeah.
I hope will happen.
I think it would be. I think it would be. Counterproductive, man. If we don't start to take a hard look. I mean, not just a surface level look. I mean, really start taking a hard look. At not just the outcome of these elections, right? But hey, the status of the blacks in these communities also, right? And I think Brother Muhammad said it well. Is that at some point, you get tired of the status quo. You get tired. Some of us can read through the code language, and it's not. And I think the outcomes of this election should also force all of these organizations, man, to look at them whether they're a national election or a local election. Say, hey, these folks who will continue these processes that we call open-ended, that invite people to actually put people in places to have voices, but those places are really not open-ended. And so really what's happening now, man, there's a segment of folks, man, who are saying, hey, I understand that quiet population that Donald Trump taught. I mean, I understand that neglect. See, because we are being neglected at a different level, right? And so it would be irresponsible of us not to understand that we're being neglected and then not try to figure out how do we make sure that we take care of ourselves, right? And get more and undo some things that I think psychological things that happen to us. And this city here also, we have to figure out a way to get a base to put some money together.
That's right.
I mean, we have to figure out a baseline to how to figure out to put some kind of money together, so therefore you can begins to have some real building blocks, all right? And I'm hoping that regardless of and in fact, I'll say this to you, man. I think it's wonderful to have people on the left or right and in the middle. What I think, because if you're in a boat. And if you got folks sitting on the left, if you got, that boat a wave coming, that boat tends to tilt too far, right? And so you want to have people in all facets of this boat, therefore, so this boat makes sure that in rocky weather, it kind of maintains its course. And what we have allowed these systems to do for us, man, is put us in one side of these boats, man, and then when it comes to storm, some folks don't know where to go,
That's right.
Well, one of the things I really liked about this whole situation was the fact that Trump pulled out Don King. So I, as a black Republican, you can't call me Uncle Tom anymore. You can call me if you want to. I don't care.
Yes,
but
sir.
it's hard. When he pulled out Don King, they had no answer for that.
Right.
And there is no answer for it. Now, Don King is probably not Uncle Tom. And I think you're the head of Nation of Islam, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. He said some things about Obama's legacy and all. They said, he got all but you going on with us. You got something going on with LGBTQ. They did well, but we didn't do as well as they did. As a matter of fact, when I looked at this, studied the outcome of what happened, Trump got, I believe, fewer white votes than Mitt Romney. But he got about 12% of the African American vote, got almost 30% of the Hispanic vote, 29% of the Hispanic vote, and I think over 30% of the Asian vote. So really, it was the vote of the people of color that really put him over.
Well, when you look at some of the statistics that have come in, really the class of citizenship, or the class of voters that voted democratically, or for the Democrats, I should say, in the previous election, were experiencing a higher percentage of voter apathy. When you look at that, the people that voted for Donald Trump, it pretty much has been consistent for the past, I think three election cycles. But there was a tremendous dip in those who voted for Barack Obama. Now, I would say this, that it is my hope that this what we call white lash or backlash of individuals that have come out the woodworks to vote for President-elect Donald Trump. And I saw black people in a scurry the day after the election. And I was blessed to share some words at a church in San Antonio that same week. And part of what I said is that we're acting as if the God that sent Moses to Pharaoh to say, let my people go, and the God that helped Jesus and his mother Mary and Joseph during the time that Herod was seeking to kill him, and the God that protected Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, 1,400 years ago, could do what he did during that time, but he's impotent to protect us during the age of Donald Trump. And I said, so either we believe or we don't believe. And so what I see is that we've placed too much of our hope in a system that was not designed to deliver freedom, justice, and equality. So I'm seeing people now saying that we must look inward and we must begin to unite and join together, because we don't know what this president and this election cycle will produce in the next 4 years. And so I'm seeing black people rethink this thing called unity and rethink this thing called pooling our resources financially. And so it is my hope that we would do kind of what is being done and has been done in other communities like the Asian community. You don't see a lot of Asians in politics, do you? You don't see a lot of them represented locally, on the state level, and on a national level, but they do have power because they've harnessed their nickels, their dimes, their quarters, their dollars, and they've united their efforts. And so if we would take the 90% of the energy that we have placed into this election system, right, pull it out and put it into our pooling of our financial resources, and maybe take 10% of that energy and leave it in the system, but focus on the financial unity, then we will start, I believe, to erect institutions in our community that will be for us, by us, for the best interest of us. But I think we got to rethink this whole thing, because I saw people depressed that week. I mean, I was like, and this is what I told the people at church. I said, you should be praise dancing up and down the aisle. You should be praise dancing at work, because this is the time for the God that you've been saying you believe in to show forth his power.
Time for you to show your faith in him.
That's right.
You want to start something here. And I think that's another one of these conversations that needs to be had. That another deeper conversation is how we have gotten here to where, there's a reaction of any magnitude based on what the system does, right? I mean, we really have to dwell deeper into some of these institutions. And I think as we start looking, and Mike, as you asked about what the black community has to do, I really think we have to revisit almost all of these so-called institutions that's been here for us, man, because we did not get here overnight. We didn't land. I think someone said we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on right. No, I mean really, we didn't. Where we are mentally, psychological, emotional, financial, we did not get here at this point in 2016 overnight. This has been some structured things that's been happening that, to some degree, too many of our institutions, the people who was in leadership positions, led us down this path also. Now, I'm also saying that it's just not their fault. At some point, we have to recognize what's going on and have your voice. I mean, and
we
do
gotta
things.
Own that.
Well, absolutely. And just as we have these conversations here, man, this is not about can I be more blacker than you? You know what? Because this is like, or less blacker than you because you may identify with a different part. Hey, my core should be what connects us, right? And our eyesight, we can see. No matter what, I don't care what you try to line yourself up with. At the end of the day, you can see when you drive through communities who lives, I don't care, what they're like, where most of them live. And so you can see it's not even about those things. So we have to really begin to shift our focus, man. And I'll tell you, I think it's going to be one of the toughest things we're going to ever have to do. Because I think we have systems that are institutions that are gatekeepers, man, to the status quo, man.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think, piggybacking on what you guys talking about, I think the current situation presents us an opportunity.
Right on.
Yes.
And we have the brain power to take advantage of this opportunity. To me, it's like, to me, right now, you guys know, y'all know my political affiliation. I know yours independent.
Right.
I know you Nation of Islam, but we all bleed red blood. We all brothers, for real. And I see this election. Right now, the Congressional Black Caucus was what, 100% opposed to charter schools, and the NAACP, I believe, is on the same trip. But that was one of the reasons I wanted Trump to win, was because he was the only one that talked about doing something about charter schools. And I've talked to people. I have a good friend of mine who's an appeals court judge in Tennessee. He sits on a couple of charter school boards. He says, well, some make it, some don't. I say, well, public schools are failing. We know that. And I say, we should be willing to try anything because we know that ain't work. That's not working.
Well,
And he says, well, it's complicated. So what?
well, and I'll say this, that you know, for me, the election and candidates, I take what they say with a grain of salt. But I did recognize that he was addressing a system that I am a part of, you know, professionally. And so, that caught my ear, of course. But I'll say this, that, you know, some of those individuals who wanted to see change, we got to look at this atmosphere very closely, because President-elect Donald Trump has not even been inaugurated. And many things that he promised during his campaign, he's already moonwalking and backpedaling on some of them, you know. But that's because now he's finding out the inner workings of some of the aspects of the things that he spoke of. And so, but again, the things in politics, we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. We have permanent interests.
Right.
So, you know, while you see the politicians rallying or attempting to rally the country back to support the president, because he will be the president of the United States of America, regardless to what you think of him and what you think about him, we have to take advantage. We will never be able to take advantage of any good proposed law or any bill that's put on the table if we're not united in that effort. And so that's the fallacy of an Obama presidency, you know, in the face of the lack of justice that we see, because we have not been able to unite to the degree to where we could take advantage of that man being in office and anything that he would put forth, even though they were fighting a lot of what he attempted to do. So again, I think Trump is good for America. Trump is good for the black community. And what's good for the black community is is good for America. And the reason I say that is because I think and I feel like when you check the pulse of black America, you check the heart of black America, we really fear in our community what's going to be brought forth. Now you're hearing about these rashes of individuals that are coming out and assaulting black people, and they're yelling things like Trump 2016. Mm-hmm. So what we saw during the campaign is continuing to rear its ugly head. Now they, you know, some people say they're isolated situations, but he's going to have to speak to the fact that these people feel so comfortable now, based on the platform, some of the aspects of the platform that he ran on. And he's going to be called on to quiet some of this noise if he's going to be an effective president for the United States of America, because you can't carve out African Americans or black people, and then carve out Asians, and then carve out other immigrants and say this group that's left is the United States of America. No, you can't do that in 2016.
Here's what concerns me from a political perspective. Trump's election, really, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Urban League, the traditional African American organizations really had no impact and had no bearing on what went on. So, my thing is we have to do something to be able to get it access, get in somebody's ear. We got to get somebody to be able to communicate our concerns.
It wasn't.
I think.
No,
And you said earlier, you talked about how these organizations have contributed to getting to us getting in the situation we're in.
Let me do this.
So we need that dynamic, that leadership dynamic needs to change.
It surely needs to be recognized. Let me do this. I mean, you're looking at the guy, and we talk about charter schools. I'm one of these guys. I'm the first black ever elected on a public school board out in this place called Pflugerville. So I used to be this, pro school, public school. Public schools, I mean, that's what I ran on. However, I sit back and watch this brother, David Allen, over at, I think it's Texas Empowerment Academy. And I just kind of watched from afar, kind of close up, going to a few events, watching some of these kids who had chosen, his parents had chosen them to give them a different route, man. And then got a chance to be associated with some of the kids also. And I'm saying, unequivocally, that I think charter schools are a good thing. And I'll tell you, it was that brother in his school, and what I saw, those outcomes, right, that said, hey, wait a minute, every kid, maybe those public schools, it's not for everyone. Also, and then public schools has this problem, has some of its biases also, and has some of its political structure. So if we can get our kids to in places where they can have smaller classes and they can excel, I have no problem with that. Now, talking about these institutions, and respectfully, I grew up in in this Christian umbrella, NAACP, Urban League, all of those things. That, and I think that if organizations aren't willing to continue to reinvent themselves, right, then I think, you can end up being what I call, whether it's churches, and I'm not just singling out any church, but I'm talking about the church system and the religious system in this town. You're seeing less and less people turning to religion, and because religions have produced those outcomes, right? And so I think until some of these institutions start to deliver outcomes, right, and reinventing themselves, right, to where, they have a real application to the quality of someone's life. If not, they just become institutions. They become what I call heads without a body. And that means, what happens is that in this capitalistic system, in this system where we sometimes politically correct, we're going to always acknowledge some of these institutions as being stalwart institutions. But behind the scenes, are we saying also, we may recognize it, but also we realize that they don't have any power behind them either. And I tell you, I think that that model of thinking happens a lot more. And I think here in Austin, Texas, I think it happens. And sure, if it happens here, I think it happens in other places when you can look at institutions that sound good, who's been around, right? But it's all about outcomes, right? And people, and also, what about the folks who you say you're representing? Are they quality of life improvement?
Well, I was thinking this evening to myself, and this sometimes can be
well, you don't think to yourself, man, too hard, man. That can be hard. That can be hard. That's hard on you, man.
I was thinking, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Where are the colored people? You call somebody colored now, you might have taken the wrong turn. So if there are no colored people, who the hell they represent?
Well, you would have to bring a representative for the National Advancement of Colored People in here to answer that question.
I'll try to do that.
But I'll say this, that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been teaching and preaching, doing for self for over 40 years here, absent of his teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so I believe we're fast coming and approaching a time where we're going to have to reconsider that, not just for organic startup businesses, but institutions like the ones he just mentioned. We're going to have to go back to that old grassroots thinking, that old do-for-self thinking, that old, you know, you don't have to give me something, just open the door and let me get it myself mentality. See, when you look at now being a part of the great institution that he mentioned, Texas Empowerment Academy, when we set out to open a second campus, the original idea was to go to churches, because by and at large, when we built churches, we always build onto the sanctuary classrooms for the study and the development.
That's what Sunday school
Now I'm gonna tell you, and to all my pastor friends out there, I may or may not be talking about you and your church, but most of the black churches we went to that were built from the ground up, the largest part of their campus or their property was the sanctuary. They barely had any room for classrooms. These are the modern churches. But every white church we went to, the smallest part of their campus or their building was in fact the sanctuary. And they had gymnasiums, they had classrooms, they had all of these things. But when we started and we were allowed to educate our people, the church opened its doors, and the deaconess and the sisters of the community and the brothers of the community, they began in one room in a small shotgun church, began to start teaching our children. We're going to have to go back to those days. We have to go back to the days where the church has to become the employment center for the community. And I don't mean for one pastor and one deacon. I'm talking about some of the things that we're doing in the Nation of Islam. We have a staple goods program where we ship dry goods all over the country, whether it's raw sugar, whether it's navy beans, whether it's honey, whether it's rice, whether it's things like that. Now we have a fish program called Able, where we ship organic chicken, we ship coho salmon, whiting, we ship coffee, we ship all of these things all throughout the country. We have a 1,600-acre farm out in Georgia. We have several of our members and brothers that have opened a farm. We have brothers down in Winnie, Texas that opened a raw milk farm where they make ice cream and butter and cheese and those types of things. We're going to have to revisit these things in our communities, because if we keep relying on other people to do for us what we have the ingenuity and we now have the resources in the over $1.1 trillion that we pull out of the American economy every year. We've got the resources to do it. But unfortunately, we've proven that we do better when things are worse.
And I think we have to really begin to, and I mean, on to your point, Mr. Muhammad, is rediscover who we are.
That's right.
I mean, who we are. You know, the thing that we said that we have in common, you know, is the blackness, right? And then I think just to understand the power of that blackness. You know, I mean, you know, and I'm not sure, I'm not a minister, but you know, I love, but having these metaphors, because it tells me that the world was created in darkness. I mean, you know, and so if the world was created in darkness, then the world was created in blackness. You know,
Come on,
I mean, no,
come on now.
And what I'm just saying, and from that came light. I mean, and I think, and see, and one of the reasons why as I keep growing, I'm glad that God is good to me. As I celebrate my blackness, you know what I recognize, man, the reason why I'm so cool with me, man, is that I realize everything comes from me. I mean, if the scientific studies that we talk about are right and things of that nature, is black absorbs everything, then you know everything comes from me. I mean, and I don't say that in a selfish manner. I say that in a very proudful manner, right?
That's right.
And I say though, but I say through these institutions over time, those things have been stripped from us, man. You know what I mean? You know, we don't walk with the wind and understand how the wind blows and the rhythm of our feet and the vibration of the earth. We have, hey man, that's who we, that's our center, our core, that I think we've gotten so away from. You know, I mean, because man had decided that, you know, these institutions work for a few people. And it's a good way to keep people and kind of corral people and control people. You know, sometimes I get so frustrated with institutions because it seems like they don't never really want to make you free or make you whole. They always want to make you feel like you got to come back to them.
Absolutely. That's
You know,
that's the
I'm
whole
saying, you know what I'm
design.
saying? You know, hey, all I'm saying, let me loose. You know, you know, and I think, and even go back to our schools, man, and how, you know, we look at what we should be articulating to our children, the conversation we should be having to our children. We do not have a conversation with our children about greatness.
That's right.
About the greatness, you know, the fact of the matter is they're great and there's nothing they can do. We have allowed our children to get caught up in all of this quagmire about what they can't do, you know, and end up competing against the wrong thing.
That's right. You know, just and you mentioned having a conversation about greatness. There was during the 2008 election, and one state in particular, they gave a standardized test before the inauguration, and in this one inner city school full of black students, they didn't do that well on the state standardized test. But after Barack Obama won the election, after he was inaugurated, and you saw old school civil rights, OG civil rights leaders like Reverend Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and those recognizing and realizing that something that they thought they would never see had happened, right? I don't care what you think about his presidency and what he did or did not do. The fact
That he made it there.
that he made it there, and even though black men, young black males were being shot down in the street, it expanded the realm of possibility in black boys and girls' minds that I don't have to be relegated to a certain segment of the neighborhood or to a certain poverty level or whatnot. So they reissued the test, didn't do any prep for it, didn't do any tutorials for it, and the scores rose exponentially just because of the idea
So it's a man.
of them seeing a brother, somebody that looks like them, that comes from, you know, in general, that comes from where they come from. The whole mindset change is, if he can do that, then I can pass this little test right here. So we got to get, and I'm in 100%, 1,000% agreement with Brother KT, because when we do that, it gives hope, and that energy that we have can be ignited inside of us again. And what we saw in the 60s, where we saw James Brown saying, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud," where you saw Muhammad Ali saying that I'm not going over there to fight no Viet Cong that ain't never called me a nigga. My fight is right here. When you start seeing people stand up for what they feel like is their God-given right, see, then we're starting to recognize greatness again, and that if you want to use it metaphorically, that little guy named by the name of David facing the Goliath. Now we're starting to say that it doesn't matter my size, it doesn't matter my position, it doesn't matter how deep my pockets are. If nothing, the scripture says that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. But what that is saying is that there's nothing more powerful than a made up mind, because the heart doesn't think, the mind thinks, right? The brain thinks, right? So there's nothing more powerful than a made up mind. So when we make up our minds that we want to do something, we want to not just survive, but we want to thrive, then there's nothing that can stop us from doing it.
Man, you know, I think that's so powerful when you say, you know, the made up mind. And think about what has happened to us, and maybe in the last 30 to 40 years, how we have allowed other folks to make up our mind. I mean, and the fact of the matter is that, you know, we're overly Democratic versus Republican. Someone's made up our mind, right? Without us really exercising why, right? I mean, you know, one of the things I used to always ask my son when he did something is, why? Tell me why. How did you get there? You know, I mean, give me some logic behind it. But nobody really can tell me why. You know. And I think, you know, Malcolm said it, you know, we can't afford to continue to be being hoodwinked, you know. And the truth is within us. You know, and that's the thing. And I think what's really the truth within us, but I think also to some degree, man, we're scared of the truth, man. Because I think when we realize the truth within us as black men, then it's going to have to cause us to have to do some things that we have not done in a long time. And that is to appreciate one another by looking each other in the eye and say, hey, you're all right with me because you are who you are. Not because you're something else, but just because you are who you are with me. And I'm here to help you in any capacity that I can. And I think we're afraid of that level of commitment that we would have to make to ourselves. I think black men are scared of have to make that level of commitment, man, to demonstrate our greatness.
I absolutely agree. I mean, you know, I go back to scripture when Moses freed the children of Israel. You know, when you read that narrative very closely, that's not talking about a people that lived 4,000 years ago. Because here is a man that was sent by God to the most powerful authority, a tyrant at that time period, who was had a people in subjugation and were brutalizing them. And once they got an opportunity to leave, they kept on asking Moses, well, do this. Well, ask Jehovah to do this. Well, ask him to do that. He parted the Red Sea. They escaped, drowned Pharaoh's army, went out into the wilderness, got to the promised land. And they tell him, man, look, we went over there. There's some giants over there. We ain't going over there. He's like, man, what? The God did all of this? And I'm telling you, the promised land is right there. So what did God do? He sent those ones wandering off in the wilderness, and he said that he would inhabit the promised land with their children, right? Mm-hmm. Because they had fear. And so the scripture said, truth shall make you free, right? Uh-huh. Well, I think after Jesus said that, there was some people in the book that said, why did he say that we would be made free? We've been in bondage to no man. But I think freedom calls for responsibility. See, that's the problem. Freedom calls for responsibility. Free men and women don't ask for other free men and women to do for them that which they can do for themselves. And I'm telling you, brothers, we have it. We don't need anybody else to do anything for us. And the moment we start doing for ourselves, when we go to the polls, when we go down to council, when we go down to the state capitol, it will mean something when we go down there because they know these people got their act together. They're united, and to go and to vote against their best interest will be to vote against our best interest. And so, but you're right. Freedom means responsibility. Yes. And it's easier for me to blame you than it is for me to look at myself and say, see, the eyes are made to look not inward, they look out, but they're an extension of the brain, right? Mm-hmm. So it's easier for me to look at you, but you got to be looking at me to help me to understand what my problem is. We don't want to do that.
Well, the thing is, I believe the circumstances are now ripe and ready for us to begin to work together. Right. I don't think we have any other choice, and I'm glad. Right.
Absolutely.
Because that may be what it takes. If it takes what it takes.
That's right.
We got to do what we got to do. Just like I told them people on CNN, I say, I don't care what Trump or any other white man says. I got to do what I got to do.
That's right.
And it really doesn't matter what he says or thinks, really. I got to do what I got to do.
Because whether he's in office or not, we got to eat tomorrow.
Right.
That I give a lot of young folks credit, man, because one thing that I like about what this thing also has done, you see a lot of young folks really trying to perk themselves up and get involved and start organizations and things of that nature. And I've run across several of them, and I give them credit, and I always tell them, don't burn out, just don't burn it. But right. That goes back to what I said early on when I first said it. Is that without some financial mechanism to help these organizations keep afloat, because we've been, well, I mean, I can speak for myself. I've been young before, and I know I don't run like I used to run, but I know how I could run, and I know if I would have had some assistance back in that day, no telling where I could be running at today.
Right.
And so, but it's clear that we talk about capitalists, and I think one of the things we have to sit back and, I don't know who, and that's the other thing is, I don't know the who, but figure out how to start somewhere of putting money up for a cause. And maybe that group decide 1 or 2 issues that they're going to work on for maybe a year, but and maybe enough, but put some money. I mean, for instance, whether you be Democrat or Republican, or Independent, that's not a candidate that we can finance and influence at all. As a black community here, they're gonna give us. Matter of fact, both sides is gonna give us who they want to represent us, right? And what do?
Yes, and that's
We
that's
need to
interesting
generate our
that
own
you say.
options.
Absolutely.
We have to, because what happens is when we don't, other people come from the outside
Fill the
and they
vacuum.
fund the organizations that at their core, at their beginning, at their genesis, were designed to work on behalf of the people. But see, when you got, what's his name, George Soros,
Yeah.
funding groups like BLM, now people can say what they want to say. And it's the same thing that happened to all our other organizations. When you look at their conception, when you look at the conception of the NAACP, Urban League, and other groups that had at their core well-intended individuals that wanted to see the rise of their people. See, when you start, just like a politician, see, when you start funding the program, see, now my money means that you are now tied to me. And so I may not say anything outright, but I might disapprove of something or a specific action that you want to take. And this idea that we can fight for justice and we want to live by a creed of non-economic liberalism, that got to go in the garbage, because there's no group of people that was able to get free without financing.
And I'll tell you something, my frustration is that it doesn't take a lot to get started. I would love to identify, 10 to 15 individuals in this community. And, and decide on a number to put away, with the common code, trying to get to a common point. And to do something, because I think also what has to happen in this sheepish mentality that we have. Sometimes people got to see you doing something. And see that, then say, "Oh man, okay, now they're a little different in how they operate."
Well, then
right?
they get on board.
And I'll take them also, But I just think that without any financial structure, it's just gonna be a lot of conversation, That's just me, and I'll tell you, I'm getting at the point to where the conversation is getting old. You know what? It's about the work, and I know all of us can't be at all places all the time, and so we're going to have to figure out also how to get this younger generation engaged, and also how they can stay engaged also.
That's right.
I was looking at some of the numbers that are coming in on this election, and the one number that disturbed me, and then there were a couple of reports that disturbed me along this same line, was that there were 6 million less African American voters.
I heard that
And
number.
what happened?
Well, I'm gonna tell you something, man. And I'm like this, and I'll say it like this. One of the reasons I voted for Barack Obama because he's a black man. I mean, I've been voting all my life, and I done voted for white folks. And so I say, look, I can vote for a black man, and I not always agree with all their policies, and so, but I think also it's one of these things also, man, that the gall of us to think that's, how many of us have a job of our own where we can go in and just because we are the top person in that company, we change everything that goes on in that company about how it operates. And so just because he became the president of the United States of America, the gall of us to think that, hey, well, all of a sudden,
everything.
Oh man, you know what? Everything here is going to change. I've been American all my life. Now what it did do for me, it did inspire me. It says, hey, that's now there's a check mark. Say, hey, we have achieved to the highest, right? But for me to think that this system, whether it's the judicial system, whether it's this education, all those things was just going to start to trickle down and change. No, the thing is not going to change until I put my hands in them and start to make them start to change also. And I think they have to change at the local level. That's where we have. That's where I think we have the biggest impact. You know. So.
Now, to me, what both of you are saying is basically get back down to basics.
Yes, sir.
Now, to
Yes,
me,
sir.
the most fundamental and the most basic is the family unit. We
Absolutely.
got to tighten up our act as
Absolutely.
far as the black family is concerned.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean, and as we talk about this family, that's another one of these things, these institutions, we got to go back to these institutions and start breaking up our families, right? You know, whether it's the judicial system, you know, I mean, how they over-incarcerate us, right? Because, I mean, so some of these things that we're doing, as I said before, we just didn't get here, you know, and as I said, some of these people who we have thought, you know, was so-called elected on our side when they wrote the laws, right? And after those laws were settled, after they moved on, you start seeing the impact of those laws. Whether it's, you know, the 3 Strikes You Out and all those things. Man, it's these institutions that have a detrimental effect on the family. And it's almost like, man, I have been their target for a long time as a black man. And the way to get to me is to get to my family. When you get to my family, then you get to my community. And when you get to my community, then we have chaos. And I'm going to tell you something. I think in some pockets, we're close to that.
Well, I'll say this, that, you know, 2 things. One, that the black man's power base is his family. You know, without that, you know, we are just a shell of a man, you know, and people can take that or leave it alone. I can, you know, but, you know, and I can tell you when you say 6 million fewer voters, you know, after 8 years of a Barack Obama presidency and the people being whipped up into a frenzy and being excited, rightfully so, of seeing a black man come into office, but from our lack of unity to take advantage of that and the fight that he got to actually even move the needle while he was in office created a large amount of voter apathy, you know. So people did not want to vote. And so I'm going to tell you, that last Hail Mary bomb that they were throwing to re-engage some of the young folks that Barack Obama had engaged, you know, and having Beyonce and Jay-Z, you know, at the campaign and rapping and singing and dancing and tap dancing and whatever else, you know, it didn't work because our realities, entertainment is empty to us when our reality speaks different from what we're hearing. And so even though they attempted that, it didn't work this time because, you know, we had 8 years to experience a black man being in office, and some of our conditions are worse than it was before he went into office, just depending on the circumstances. And some of our conditions are just no different. So, you know, then when you can get, to be quite honest with you, and I said the last time I was here that, you know, I was kind of disappointed to see so many people rallying the troops for what's the lady's name? Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton. After all she and those individuals had done and planned on doing, you know, it's just a matter of, do you want somebody to stand in your face and show you that they are not for you, or do you want somebody to say they're for you but put a knife in your back? And so that's how many of the voters felt after that. And so, you know, all that they attempted to do, because the Republican Party worked so diligently at pulling out all of the dirt on Hillary Clinton, you know, black voters said, you know what, I'm gonna abstain from this, or I'm gonna vote somewhere.
And I think folks got, and I think you know, people are getting tired of, you know, what,
Yes.
you know, of the status quo. You know what I mean? And I just say, you know what, and what we have, unfortunately, and to someone, we have gotten comfortable living uncomfortable, right? So we have gotten to where, you know, so being uncomfortable it's not really that big of a deal for us, right? So it's just like shifting a gear, you know. Or if you got a four-speed transmission and one gear goes out, you know what? You're not throwing the car away. You're just gonna keep on shifting, you know. But you're gonna get by with what you have to get, because that's how we have kind of been built, and that's how we have always done things. Now I don't say that's the way it always should be, right? Because we deserve a lot more. But also, I would say that I think we deserve a lot more from ourselves. You know, I mean, I think we deserve a great deal more than I think what we give ourselves.
You know, again, and it goes back to economics. You know, when something happens, injustice to another group of people, you know, they don't pick up picket signs and respond. We pick up picket signs to respond. They use what's valuable to respond. They withhold, or they give over here, they give over there. Mm-hmm. And I say this, in every major city, just about, you have a Chinatown, right?
Yep.
You just saw them highlighting portions of Miami and Little Havana because Fidel Castro passed at the age of 90. Incidentally, he overcame 638 assassination attempts. And many of the young people don't know he was pivotal in helping to put an end to apartheid in South Africa. So there's some bittersweet sentiments about him based on what the media. But then I'm saying that to say, in a lot of major cities, you have Greektown, you have communities that cater to the Jewish community. You have, but whenever we start talking about doing something for us, there's this old word that comes up. That's reverse racism. Why would we do it for everybody? But when I go out to this Chinatown, one of the newest ones,
we always trying to be inclusive.
When we go out there, I can't read those signs.
Right.
And I don't think anybody said, well, look, Brother Robert can't read this sign. We need to put it in English.
You have some script on the bottom of it.
It ain't for Brother Robert to read. Right. It's for people that come from our ethnicity, that know what we're putting behind this door, that know what we're making available. It's for them. And if Brother Robert wants to come and patronize and take part in our culture and a part in our ethnicity. Exactly. So we got to be willing to do the same. One of the things that has happened when we launched the boycott last year on Black Friday and Christmas on last year, and the year before that with Mike Brown, and the boycotts that started around that time period, you now have this whole new spending, what would you call it, people want to buy black now. People want to support their own now. So we got to be able to position ourselves to cash in on the mindset that we want to shop with our brother before we shop with another. Mm-hmm. So, and we got to do what everybody else does, pool our resources. And so when you see these other little places in these other cities, nobody cries reverse racism. They cry self-preservation. Preservation.
And you know, the question sometimes what's really frustrating is when they cry the reverse racism, it's usually one of us sitting at the table helping them cry.
We the ones crying the loudest.
Well, on that line, KT, you know, you and I sit on this commission, African American Resource Advisory Commission, and you know we have a faction in there that always wants to be inclusive. Yeah. And I always had this question: was nobody talking about including us?
Well, yeah, but you know what? And that seems like that's an, you know, I like the term old school because I'm old school, but that's one of those old school political kind of things, man. You know, I always trying to look out for the masses, and not even looking out for your own self. So, hey, why do you think we've had so much time, or such a good time on that?
Hey, I was going to say how many people you got in your house. It's just you and your family. You know, when you get yourself together, then you invite other folks in, or you go out to other people. But in the first thing in the morning, you don't invite people in your home.
That ain't the first move you make.
If I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat at home first before I go feed my neighbor.
That's right.
Now I may not eat everything on my plate, right? But I'm gonna take care of me first, and then I'm gonna take care of my neighbor. You know. No, man, I there's no party that I love more than my people, man.
Mama.
Yeah, I mean, nothing that I love more. But I'll tell you, man, we got some institutional reworking to do, And
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you something, man. These institutions, some of these folks who are leading them, man, is not
We
going to unravel those things very easily because
we need to pull together and supplant them.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, we need, like I said, I would love to do this. Like I said, man, we could figure out, come up with 15 to 20 folks, man. We need to start putting. We need to have an account with $50,000 to $60,000 in it, right? So we can actually, I think, then you can actually start moving some things in this community. You know what? But then don't stop there, but continue. And just like these folks, man, use these political games. You know what? That they can donate money to some of these things, man. That we have we have the folks that know how to, where you can donate this money. Your name don't have to be recognized. All those everything that's out there for them to execute it, for them to use, we should be able to use them also.
Man, I'm thankful and grateful and blessed to have had you two gentlemen on my show this evening.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, man, right
I
on.
really enjoyed it. Now, maybe we can talk some other time, not on the screen, about
I hear you.
making some of these things we talked about for real.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Because this is
That's
about
what it's about.
right talk, lead the right thinking, lead the right action, do the right thing, and let's get it right.
Yes, sir.
Working together.
Do the right thing, man. Really, your
We can't lose.
We can't lose.
Hey man, thanks man. Hey, I told you
Thank
man,
you.
you was gonna do good at this, man. I said, man, you're gonna do good at this, man. And I truly mean that we have to have folks in every segment of this thing, man. And I can't the audacity of me to not like you because you decided that you got a different set of information and you look at things differently. That just doesn't make sense to me, man.
But see, all that's about to come to an end. If Trump does some of the things that he wants to do, that's going to come to. I can't. You got to love it. I mean, it's our time.
It's an opportunity, man. It's different opportunity.
Thing that bothers me is so many of our people are scared and worried. And I tell them, God can do whatever He wants, wherever He wants, with whomever He wants, however He wants. So why worry about it?
Man, I tell you what, man. I think the people who are scared, man, these people are greatly religious